Israeli bombs continue to fall on Gaza, even as the UN chief urges a probe into the envoy convoy massacre. This is Gaza Under Attack, coming to you from the British capital, London. My name's Amina Taylor. Let's bring you up to speed with the latest developments. The Palestinian envoy at the United Nations has slammed the body's Security Council for not doing enough to stop the genocide against the Palestinians, but also to hold Tel Aviv to account for the massacre of scores of Gazans who were fired on by occupation forces whilst awaiting humanitarian aid. In the UK, a staunch pro-Palestine politician has secured a landslide victory in a by-election, predominantly running a campaign against the genocide in Gaza. George Galloway won the Rochdale seat previously held by the Labour Party, winning by over 12,000 votes. Occupation force violence has intensified in the West Bank, with troops storming the Kalandia refugee camp. Settler violence has also spiked, with attacks on Palestinians on the outskirts of Jalud, south of Nablus. The US-led Israeli bombardment of Gaza continues. 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of them women and children. So much to get through, and helping me to do just that for this edition of the program in the studio, Dr. Ranjit Brar, consultant surgeon and author, and via Skype from Leeds, Sheikh Jafar Ladakh, renowned Islamic scholar and author. Welcome to you both. I kick things off here with you in the studio, Ranjit. I mean, we're going to discuss the political earthquake that was George Galloway's victory later on in the show. But can I start with your reflections of the last 5 months? You've sat on this sofa previously and lamented the growing death count, the martyrdom rates. Yet weeks later, here we are.
Yes, and it's an indictment, isn't it? It's an indictment of our national politics in Britain and our international politics in the world, that the people who consider themselves the leaders of the free world, I don't consider themselves that, but they label themselves that. Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron, Baer Bock and Chancellor Scholz, all of them have been mouthing platitudes, generally supporting Israel and repeating a false narrative. And as we saw when they bombed, Khan Yunis Hospital, or flying to Gaza and standing with Israel standing with Netanyahu very directly. But even now, even in the face of this atrocious attack on civilians trying to get food on the outskirts of Gaza City, saying things like, we need to have an investigation, we need to have a probe, let's get to the bottom of what's happening. Strongest possible condemnation. But what is their strongest possible condemnation? They're continuing to supply the weapons, to give full political, military, diplomatic backing. We know that the drones that do the surveillance missions that support Israel are British Army drones flown from Cyprus. The weapons continue to flow, the aid continues to flow, the packages continue to flow to Israel. And the same can be said of many of the Arab regimes, including Egyptian regime, including including the Jordanian regime, including the Saudi regime, mouthing platitudes, sometimes even quite strong-sounding words, but it's words, not actions, while they allow the genocide to continue to unfold. And as we see the people being pushed systematically, first it was North Gaza, then it was Gaza City, then it was a central province, then it was Khan Yunis, relentlessly from north to south. As we said the first time that we met, they're very deliberately perpetrating a genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Dr. Brar, Sheikh Ladakh, I mean, we hear the words, there nowhere left to go for these individuals stuck inside the besieged enclave. Is this why any further intensification inside Rafah would be diabolical?
We can only just be aghast at what's taking place. The idea that any of the objectives that Israel have meted out at the beginning can be met has been proven to be nonsensical. You can't destroy Hamas. You cannot destroy the ideology of freedom and liberation. That's a human instinct and a human right. You cannot bomb the Palestinians into submission, and you cannot avert the world's gaze from the genocide that's taking place. Nor are they able to find the prisoners that have been taken. So all you're left with is a last throw of the dice which is starvation and daily massacres, in order to try to rid themselves of the Palestinian people. This is never going to work, and that's why even pushing them towards the Rafah border will not make any difference to the Palestinian liberation cause.
All right, well, we'll come back to that conversation, but in the meantime, the top Palestinian envoy at the United Nations, as I mentioned there, has strongly condemned Tel Aviv after more than 120 Gazans were killed in violence on Thursday. Speaking in New York, Riyad Mansour was scathing in his criticism of the Security Council for not doing more to address the ongoing genocide and this new massacre. Witnesses say Israeli troops opened fire on a crowd of people scrambling for aid in Gaza City. More than 100 are already confirmed killed and at least 700 wounded, according to Gaza's health ministry.
This outrageous, massacre is a testimony to the fact that as long as the Security Council is paralyzed and vetoes casted, then it is costing the Palestinian people their lives. I met in the morning with Ambassador Linda Greenfield, and I couldn't discuss anything except that issue with her because, it happened this morning and the news came to us this morning. I implored her that the Security Council has to produce a product of condemning this killing and to go after those responsible for this massacre. Accountability is extremely important, and that the Security Council should say enough is enough, and if they have a spine and determination to put an end to these massacres from happening all over again, what we need is a ceasefire.
Sheikh Ladak, some devastating scenes previously, but we're hearing strong words from the Palestinian representative at the UN. But should he even be bothering with that institution at the moment?
Nobody doubts that there are good individual actors at the United Nations, but the system is paralyzed by the powers that created this as a tool, as a mechanism for their own control. So either it has to be that nations that are seriously trying to reshape the political landscape, they either need to be able to withdraw from these institutions, or they need to genuinely reshape it from the ground up. Sadly, it may be that the way in which the international community has treated this live streaming genocide for almost half a year, this may be a catalyst for genuine political change. It has to be so sad that 30,000 civilians being massacred, 100,000 being injured, has to be the catalyst for these conversations. But it might be that this has to be the conversation that is being raised. The fact that he is begging the United Nations to be able to intervene is the sad indictment of the situation that it finds itself in the first place.
Indeed, Ranjit Brar. But just to change tack slightly, we talked there about advocating for change and trying to push that through. But those voices who choose to do that sometimes pay a heavy price. You've had a notable victory lately. Just fill us in on that and some of the pressures that are being brought to bear on these voices advocating for Palestine.
Thank you, Mina. So I always emphasize the main sacrifices being given by the people of Gaza, and I don't want to in any way compare myself to that. But as an example of the way they are afraid of a movement growing here, a strong and growing movement, and we're going to talk about George Galloway's victory, which absolutely rattles the cage of the political establishment. But 1 million people on the streets, as we had on 11th November, and regularly 500,000 to 750,000 on the streets that aren't going away. It's not like the Gulf War, when people came on the streets, were told we don't care what you think and went home, and then apparently nothing happened for 10 years. It's a persistent and strong movement. And so there are many people who've been targeted. Personally, myself, I was arrested just for selling a book critical of Zionism. And they've tried deliberately, which is the tactic of the Israeli state and of our own government, to conflate anti-Zionism, discussed with the crimes committed by a political entity, ideology and state, which are far-right, fascistic, ultra-nationalist crimes. Criticism of that, they're saying, that's anti-Semitism, that's racism, which absolutely is not the case. And I've been meticulous in saying I've been a lifelong anti-racist campaigner. I'm criticising these crimes. Nevertheless, I was arrested for this book. After that, they put bail conditions on me. I can't attend demonstrations. I can't give out literature. I can't educate my fellow workers. I can't go on demonstrations and go off the prescribed route. Later on, they came for me a second time. And I went to a demonstration in accordance with my bail conditions, and they rearrested me, this time on conditions of, they said, terrorism, for saying victory to the Palestinian people in their just war of resistance. They say, oh, this is supporting Hamas. Now, some people are very direct and open in their support of Hamas, but they've made Hamas a prescribed terrorist organisation under UK law. If you give open support, you can go to jail for up to 14 years. You know, it's a huge penalty. And in this way, you know, you've seen regularly on Talk TV people like Piers Morgan come and trying to entice people into, standing for Palestine in order to try and victimise them. And so this is what they've done. And to me personally, they've reached out to try and threaten my wife and family with social services. They've raided my house in the middle of the night on 2 occasions. They've approached my work. They've tried to get me sacked. And they've published national articles, both in the Telegraph and the Jewish Chronicle, trying to imply that I'm in some way a racist and therefore discredit me as a person and professionally. So tremendous personal, financial, professional and moral pressure they seek to bring to bear. What's very interesting is they're failing. They're failing judicially. So in the first case, they had to admit they had no grounds for the charges and drop all cases. In the second case, I'm convinced the same thing will happen. And a group of people who were arrested along with me from my party, just the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninists, were also victimised. Half of those have been released, half are still under charges. But what we're seeing is this is a much wider question than my particular party or me as an individual. It's about trying to criminalise a movement. And we saw Rishi Sunak just come out again and say quite deliberately, these are hate marches, the police must crack down on them.
Of course, and from the Prime Minister, that's quite dangerous rhetoric. Sheikh Ladakh, I don't know briefly how much you'd like to say from a personal standpoint, but your contribution is welcomed with this very same question about the pressures being brought to bear on pro-Palestine voices in the UK right now.
As you just heard from this notable guest, an insight, an experience that he's had, anyone who is trying to move forward with the Palestinian cause is being pressurized from various different sides, from the media, from workplaces, and so on. The recent statements about sort of chaos that is being brought to the London streets, being made by the Home Secretary, being made by the Prime Minister, there's a desperate attempt to further a culture war in order to find some means of re-election. The UK government is a shamble. It's an embarrassment. It has no policies that it can run on for a snap election or an election later on in the year. Their entire goal is to create and further a culture war. As part of that, they have to be able to try to demoralize, try to scapegoat the pro-Palestinian movement. And part of that has been saying things like the pro-Palestinian movement is a descent into mob rule. They never said those words when it came to the far-right protests or them falling into the trap and working with far-right politicians. That's not mob rule. But any Palestinian that seeks the liberation of a community that's undergoing an active genocide being live streamed to the world, all of a sudden we are mob rule. Now we have to understand that language...
And I'll base with you there, Sheikh Ladakh, about the political ramifications of that in a second. But just hold a pin here because you're, of course, watching Gaza Under Attack. We try to take a deeper dive into the news surrounding the ongoing US-led Israeli genocidal war on Gaza. Now, in a stunning electoral upset, pro-Palestinian politician George Galloway led his Workers' Party of Britain to a historic by-election victory in Rochdale in England's northwest. Galloway overturned a 10,000 Labour Party majority and will now take his seat in the House of Commons with a mandate to advocate for Palestinian voices. In his victory speech, Galloway issued a shot across the bow for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Labour leadership.
This is going to start a movement, a landslide, a shifting of the tectonic plates in scores of parliamentary constituencies, beginning here in the Northwest, in the West Midlands, in London, from Ilford to Bethnal Green and Bow. Labour is on notice that they have lost the confidence of millions of their voters who loyally and traditionally voted for them generation after generation. I've heard some of the narrative being spun around this election result this evening. Yes, it's true that every Muslim is bitterly angry at Keir Starmer and his misnamed Labour Party. But you would be very foolish if you did not realise that millions of other citizens of our country are too. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are two cheeks of the same backside, and they both got well and truly spanked tonight.
And Galloway's victory is proof that Muslims are in fact fed up of being taken for granted by the Labour Party. This is the assessment of political activist in Rochdale, Ijaj Khan, who said other politicians in Muslim-majority constituencies should take note.
I think it has a massive impact because what's happening in Rochdale has far-reaching kind of impact. So in terms of Rochdale, what we've done here, we've shown Keir Starmer that it's not going to happen anymore. We're not going to take the Muslim vote anywhere in the UK for granted. You're going to have to work for that vote. You're going to have to listen to people. We've not had a ceasefire now. You know, the amount of days that have gone by, people have been slaughtered in Gaza. You know, they're left with no water, no food, no energy. People are, women are given birth without any, any medication or it's just a dire situation, really. And I think with George coming in now, he's going to show a strong message to Westminster that, we're not going to accept it anymore. I do think so. Strong Muslim communities such as in Bradford, Burnley, Oldham, there are a lot of people that are looking to go independent. And from there, we're doing some connection with George. The Workers' Party throughout the UK, standing candidates to make a change, really. The Muslim vote is quite a large bank vote, and it's been taken for granted for too long, and it's time for that to change. George Galloway to come in, he's going to create a massive tsunami, and that's going to go straight through to Keir Starmer, to all the Labour, MPs. Tories are going to be finished in the next election. And they have to work for our votes. And it's not going to be a walk in the park for them as they thought they're going to have a landslide victory. It's not going to happen. So George is there. He's going to make a change for us. They make a difference for us. And I think that scares them.
Meanwhile, back in Gaza, the World Health Organization and other partners on the ground coordinated a mission to Al Amal PRCS Hospital in Khan Yunis on the ground. Crucial medical supplies were delivered to the facility, straining at the seams to provide care after being bombarded, with staff and patients alike marooned inside for over a month, fearing sniper salvos if they went outside.
Many of elected cases, surgical cases, already postponed. It's 5 months, nothing has been done from the elected cases. Many surgeries already, for example, cholecystectomy, thyroid, all of these procedures, normal procedures, has not been carried out in any hospital. So our people, most of those patients either died or they are suffering more and more.
We have a few more minutes to go of the conversation. Let's carry on with Mr. Ranjit Brar and Sheikh Jafar Ladak. Sheikh Ladak, I was just finishing up with you there on the impact of something like what we witnessed in Rochdale actually taking wings and spreading across the UK. Your own reaction?
So the previous question was about the pressure, and now we're turning to the victory in Rochdale. And what you can see is that all that political pressure and all that media pressure has actually done the reverse. It's not scared those on the course of the Palestinian resistance. Actually, you've lit a fire underneath us, and we become even more determined to actually create change, meaningful change, outside of the systems that you have created. And that means things like the independence movements that are taking place, such as in Newham, such as in Rochdale, and other places. You're actually seeing ads on the side of buses and on the side of bus stops saying things like, a vote for Labour is a vote for genocide. And this scares the political mainstream because they've never seen people uprise like this in the way in which we're doing at the moment in Britain. And I want to say that this morning I actually watched a number of different reports from the mainstream media about Mr. Galloway's brilliant victory. For example, the leader of the Reform Party, his comments, even James O'Brien's comments. And what you can see is that they are petrified and terrified of people actually going out of their system and waking up and taking this fight to them. And I think we're on the cusp of something very, very big.
Are we, Ranjit Brar? Are we on the cusp of something else?
We are. I'm delighted with George's victory. I was a founder member of the Socialist Labour Party with Arthur Scargill. I was a founder member of the Workers' Party with George Galloway. I'm fully in favour of taking it electorally to the enemy's territory. But what we're dealing with is with British imperialism. It's a big system. It's strong. They control them. When I say they, I mean British imperialism. I mean the finance capitalists, the City of London. They control the media. They control our work. They control our jobs. They control our politics. They control all the mainstream parties. So I am in favour of everyone up and down the country standing independent candidates and really hammering it home to them, because at the moment they are two cheeks of the same arse. You can vote one way or another way and you get the same thing. Same as the Democrat and Republican in New York. Same as Labour and Likud in Israel. There's no party that doesn't stand for genocide. There's no party that doesn't stand with British imperialism. And our British imperialist system, just as much as they created Israel with the mandate, at the same time, they were committing atrocities after World War I, reaffirming their rule over the population of India, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So it's high time that all immigrant populations stop their support of both Labour and Tory, but it's wider than that. It's the British working class as well. The same people who are suffering this huge cost of living crisis are also victims of this system which is driving relentlessly towards war. So I'm delighted with this victory. I send congratulations to George, but we're going to need a wider education movement that will have lots of political victories, but we must all learn. We're coming from many different backgrounds, and this is the power of this movement. Many different backgrounds. People are reaching out to me from places they never would have done before because they would have seen me as alien and different because I'm a socialist. But no, we're realizing we are all against the same enemy. We're all against imperialism. It's a very big and protracted struggle. People find it strange that I come to Press TV, which is an Iranian TV station, and say, but you're a socialist. This is not the point. They're on the front line of the struggle against imperialism. It's a broad and wide struggle. I'm delighted with this victory. It's one milestone in what is a very deep path of change, and I hope we're going to see a lot of developments and embark upon it together.
Now, of course, very briefly there, Ranjit, Keir Starmer must have thought, oh, not him again.
It's a nightmare for them. It's an absolute nightmare. It was Blair who kicked him out. It's Blair Mark II, Keir Starmer, who's come back. And George is still there. And it shows you his courage, integrity, and his principle, particularly on this question of imperialism on Palestine, on the Middle East, has never gone away. And, ultimately the truth will out. They had an inquiry after Iraq war and said, we didn't know about the weapons of mass destruction. We knew quite clearly at the time they were lying. They were going to war to protect their wealth, their oil wealth in the Middle East. It's still about protecting their right to loot the Middle East, to loot the world, to divide the world. And George is leading a political movement in Rochdale. There's a big movement, a worldwide groundswell. And we can see that with the rise of BRICS and the change of power. There's a change in the balance of power in the world.
And I feel it from here, Ranjit Brar. You've said it here first, and that, unfortunately, is all the time we have for today. Thanks to my guests, Mr. Ranjit Brar and Sheikh Jafar Ladak, for joining us.